What's going on, everybody? Today I'm here in the new recording studio that I usually change every single video with a giant head in the background. Today we're going to talk about when you should not swap exercises out in your program. There is too much swapping and not enough doing consistently, and that's a key point that we're going to have to consider when we discuss swapping exercises out as regularly as some people do. So when discussions arise about whether or not I should swap exercises out, I think it's really important to refer to the law of diminishing returns, which basically means that if you do an exercise for an extended period of time, eventually you'll not be able to progress on it. So we're going to use the example of doing back squats. Let's say you've been back squatting for a really long time. You just can't progress on back squats anymore. You know, it could be a variety of things. Swapping it out for a block, maybe with front squats instead of back squats, and then coming back to it. So basically, because the stimulus is novel and new, you'll be able to make progress again on the front squat, and then hopefully there'll be that transfer of performance and you'll be able to progress on the back squat too. That doesn't mean like you just swap exercises out for the sake of swapping them and just pick some random exercise. Sometimes it's more effective to pick an exercise that will help. Let's say you have a weakness in a lift that will help the other lift. Let's say your quads, diminishing factor in your squat. Maybe doing front squats, which is a little more knee dominant, will help your back squat. I actually don't think that the difference between front and back squats is that substantial. You could make the case for yes, a little more thoracic extension, a little more knee dominance, but I think for the most part it really just comes down to preference and which exercise you enjoy doing. Whilst it is important to target weaknesses, a lot of the time like beginner lifters are just weak to begin with. So I think that just swapping it out and allowing the stimulus to be novel and then the lifter to progress on that lift just because the stimulus is new again will likely yield good results regardless of whatever weakness they experienced. One really common reason that I actually think is a viable reason to swap out a lift is because you're bored batshit of that lift. The reason I think it's a good reason is because of adherence. So obviously if you don't like the lift, you're not going to do it, and these bad habits will eventually, they could lead to you not even doing the program to begin with. You can just pick 3 lifts that you really enjoy for a few blocks or a few months and do them and progress them. Side note, I think people get caught up in the big 3 and thinking they're like these magical lifts. They're definitely not. There was a stage where I was doing back squats for my main squatting movement, and then for my main hip dominant movement I was actually doing like a low rack pull just because I didn't want to stress my back out because it was pretty stressed at the time and I was recovering from injury. And then my main horizontal push for the, like, instead of bench press, was incline dumbbell bench press, and I did that for months and I made great progress. So like I mentioned at the start of the video, I actually am a big advocate of performing a lift for a very long time and doing it consistently. For the first like year of really good training, I picked like a few movements and just did them, and I got really good at them. Like, I think my main horizontal press at one point was just flat dumbbell bench press. And I did that for like a year, and in the end I was doing 50s, and mind you I was a lot heavier, 50s, 50 kilos each arm for 13 reps, and that was quite an achievement for me. And then once I hit 13 reps, I thought, you know what, I'm not going to achieve anything else by doing even more reps. And that's when I did incline instead. So I actually think new lifters do swap exercises out too soon. And this is apparent when a new lifter comes along and they do an exercise for 2 weeks and then they don't do it again. Like I've sort of touched on this before. But there is obviously like motor learning and skill acquisition adaptations that occur. In order for you to like be really good at, you know, lifting weights, and I'm just talking, it could be for anything. It could be for sporting tasks, improving athletic attributes, it could be for bodybuilding, and it could just be because you like it. You need to like do the lift often and consistently. So if a new lifter keeps swapping exercises out over and over again, then they have to keep relearning the same, well, a similar movement pattern. And yeah, there is that transfer. It's not as good as if you just consistently did the same lift. You have to think like all the time spent learning a new lift or getting better at the new lift, maybe grooving the pattern and all that sort of stuff, whilst they are pretty simple lifts to learn, there's still a learning curve for every single one of them. Even easy stuff like bicep curl. Granted, the less complex an exercise is, the more likely you can swap it out. You know, your main horizontal push, your main lower body push, and your main lower body pull, they should remain fairly consistent for a few months. The more advanced you are, the more you can swap these exercises out, because more often than not, you're better at tracking these lifts than beginners are. A lot of the beginners I talk to, and even like intermediate to advanced lifters I talk to, don't even track their progress, they just sort of intuitively train. If you think like you've made some good progress intuitively training, you probably have, because you probably do lift more and you do augment that increase in volume somewhat, but eventually you will need to track your lifts so you can increase that volume even more. Because are you really advanced if you don't know how to track your lifts? I think that tracking and programming are crucial components of like the training age and training experience continuum. That's not to say that auto-regulation in program design is useless. It's actually a very useful tool to use. So I use, with my clients and myself, I use a PRE scale, I use reps in reserve, and I actually don't use a percent of 1 rep max with a lot of people because a lot of people just aren't like powerlifters and don't really need that really objective data. But there is enough objective data in there, like sets, reps, tempo, rest times, and there is obviously subjective data like reps in reserve and PRE. It's probably better to use more objective data than anything, just because like you can look at it and go, right, that's what I need to do, that's what I'm going to do. Like if you know that you only did 3 sets of 9 with, let's say, bench press, then maybe you can go, all right, I'll do 1 set of 10 and 2 sets of 9. Then you've increased your tonnage by 1 rep times however much weight you did. I think the biggest no-brainer reason to swap an exercise out is if it causes you pain or discomfort. Now, this might come as a shock to some of you, but if something hurts, don't do it. Don't do what I have made the mistake of doing. I actually don't know how many times. So I'm going to put a massive disclaimer on this section of the video about how I'm not a physio, osteo. I don't treat pain, or I think a lot of people think like personal trainers like treat pain, or I think actually a lot of personal trainers think that they are like pain experts, but we are not. Like I train movements and I make people really strong and jacked and really confident, and I empower people through exercise, and I'm an exercise prescription expert, but by no means do I in any way like handle someone's pain. And pain is a very complex topic, and I always refer out the biopsychosocial model when talking about pain science. You really have to refer to that, because whilst biomechanics is really important to consider when talking about pain science, there are a multitude of factors that can contribute to someone feeling pain or discomfort, like someone's level of confidence, their beliefs, or just the amount of stress they're feeling for that particular day. So in no way is this section of the video meant to like be some sort of magical cure for pain. But adjusting angles or loading parameters of certain lifts can allow you to do those lifts without feeling the discomfort that you would have felt if you didn't sort out the discomfort in the first place. So for instance, I like to use the example of sometimes with a fixed barbell, it just hurts. It hurts their shoulders, or it hurts their wrists, or it hurts something. And like I said, pain is very complex. But yes, so if I move someone from the fixed barbell and I move them over to, let's say, a dumbbell horizontal push, whether it be incline, decline, or flat. So sometimes even just keeping the grip the same, so that like pronated grip, and just doing flat dumbbell bench press instead of flat barbell bench press. If they still get pain, sometimes I swap to a neutral grip and people don't get pain anymore, whether it's wrist pain, elbow pain, or shoulder pain. Usually it's shoulder pain. A neutral grip tends to clean up some shoulder pain issues. But sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes just keeping that pronated grip and just swapping the modality tends to alleviate whatever discomfort the trainee is feeling. Another really important one, or like a really common one, is the back squat. So sometimes people experience knee pain when back squatting. You have to understand that knees going over toes is normal. There is nothing wrong with that. Your knees go over your toes when you walk all the freaking time. And if you're going to talk about, well, what about when with a loaded barbell? Well, you have ankles. And they dorsiflex, so you should probably use them. Another really important point to consider is if the ankle doesn't like dorsiflex under a load, then your spine, depending on the shape of your hip socket, and you get bone-to-bone contact. But for the most part, like eventually you will hit a certain depth where you end up in spinal flexion under a load, and I can assure you that that is a lot more like high on the risk-reward rate, like more on the risk side when you're loaded than it is to dorsiflex the ankle. So what I do in this situation, I'd squat into a box, coach them more hip dominant, so they push their ass back a little bit more, and they have more of a vertical shin. And sometimes like putting a band around the knee to facilitate abduction at the hip and engage the side butt muscles, as I say. So thank you very much for watching this video. It was a little more serious in tone than the usual video. I haven't been as funny, but that's okay, because sometimes you just can't be funny. Just understand that swapping out exercises can be a viable tool to augment some progress, or if you're really bored, it can be a viable tool you can use to stick to your program. And again, please don't train through pain. Find other ways you can do exercises that you like, and make sure that consistency is the thing that you're doing the most of. Just be consistent and everything will just sort of work itself out. Thank you very much, guys, and I'll speak to you in the next video.